What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you want to support me, you can always use that TCGPlayer link in the description down below, or just liking, commenting, and subscribing, boosting the algorithm will always do the trick. Now let's get into today's Deck Tech with Calix. This guy might not be the best enchantment build, but he's definitely the most fun. Now, we're going to shove a lot of those enchantments, like I know doubling season, to go ahead and double up on our token creation, and then start making token copies of them. There's a total of 5 token creators in this deck that just double the amount of tokens we put onto the battlefield, and out of those 5, 4 of them are enchantments, so it can get pretty broken pretty fast. Additionally, we'll just shove a lot of enchantments that create tokens in the deck as well. So now we're creating tokens of the enchantments that create tokens, and we double up on those tokens that we are creating. It's going to get pretty insane pretty quickly. On top of all of the enchantments we play, or at least let's be honest, every other enchantment we play has draw a card just tacked onto it for no reason, and it helps us with our plan. So if that sounds like a deck tech you want to get into, let's get into it. Let's kick it off with the absurdity of this deck and doubling those tokens. We have doubling season, parallel lives, and anointed processions. Staples, you guys knew they were going to be here. We're just doubling up those tokens with enchantments. We also have primal vigor. This one's a little different because it is an effect for the table. So watch out if you're playing against an Adrix and Nev. Maybe you hold off on casting this until you're ready to storm off. Mondrak, Glory Dominus, solid. It's a creature, so we won't be able to copy it, but still, it's here to double those tokens, and we can make it indestructible. Pretty solid. We also have a slew of enchantments that create tokens whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield. A Johnny's Chosen and Archon of the Sun's Grace. Now, this one is a creature, so we can't copy it, but it's still going to create a lot of tokens. Hallowed Hauntings. This one's going to be amazing. Once we start creating token copies of it, and we're going to get more and more of those spirits that are just going to get bigger and bigger, honestly, this can take over the game. Sigil of the Empty Throne, another solid enchantment to throw into the deck. Now we're creating 4/4 angels whenever we cast one of those enchantment spells, and whenever we create copies of it, we're just adding 8 power, 12 power, 16 power to the battlefield for one enchantment. Felidar Retreat is a solid include here because it's pretty flexible. We can either help it create a big board state, or we can go ahead and buff our entire board state. History of Benalia. Now, yes, we are going to copy some of these sagas, and this one is pretty insane. We can just keep creating more and more night tokens, and then once we create 3 token copies of these, that third one's going to go off buffing our whole night tokens, and then we can just keep our board in a cycle of buffing our night tokens, creating more night tokens, and then before you know it, we've got a bunch of massive knights and a huge board of knights. Second Harvest is a solid card. All we have to do is cast this and boom, it's going to double up on all of our tokens. Also, it goes without saying that we are running Helm of the Host in the deck. Now we can create those token copies of our commanders that aren't legendary, and we can start creating token copies of him that will, again, create more token copies of our enchantments. Let's walk out the effects of doubling these enchantment effects, just so you know to bring a calculator whenever you play this guy. The first trigger, you get 2 doubling seasons. Not terrible, but then you're going to go to 8, and then the third time, only the third time you create a token copy of doubling seasons, you're going to go ahead and create 2,048 of those enchantments. Now, remember, don't deck yourself with this. If you got any of those enchantment draw effects, you've just essentially thrown your deck and died. But like I said, this deck can be insane and honestly gets out of control very quickly. Moving on to the core of the deck, we have Destiny Spinner. This is going to make all of our enchantments uncounterable and honestly can reanimate some giant lands that can start one-shotting people if we get enough enchantments on the battlefield. The World Spell. I like this one because we can keep creating token copies of it, and it's got that really useful read ahead ability. So we don't even have to wait the top 2, which are really useful abilities. We can just skip to the third if we have something really good that we want to throw onto the battlefield. We also have quite a few auras in the deck. That way we're not relying on just our commander to activate his ability. Eidolon of Countless Battles. This one's insane. You can just throw this one onto the battlefield, start creating token copies of it, and honestly, it's going to get massive pretty quick. Or you can use that bestow ability to throw it on another creature, and then that creature is going to get pretty big pretty quick. Angel's Gift is a solid enchantment because one, it's going to draw us a card whenever it enters the battlefield, so it's got utility there, and then we can enchant creatures with flying, which will give them evasion, and they'll be enchanted so we can trigger our commander's ability. Notably, we have a lot of token creatures, so we can just give all of our token creatures flying while drawing a lot of cards. I love that. Benevolent Blessing. This one straight up gives protection from a color of your choice, so you know you're basically going to make your commander unblockable. Dryad's Favor, someone's going to be playing green, now your your commanders unblockable to those green players. Ethereal Armor, a super cheap aura that honestly makes a creature super big. Felidar Umbra, I like this one because it gives lifelink, that's whatever, but honestly, it's got that Umbra totem armor ability. So now we can make the majority of our important creatures unkillable. Indomitable Might. Now this card just says, hey, I don't care if you block me, we are activating the commander's ability, and that's exactly what it does. Citizen Training, just a super solid enchantment that draws us a card. Again, that's really useful. And then it just gives +1 and trample, so it ensures that our commander is going to get through because we're going to make a massive. Spectral Ward, super solid, just protection from all colors. You got to love it. We do run Heroic Interventions because it makes all of our permanents indestructible. It's going to be hard to build back from a board wipe, but we do have some things to do that, such as Brilliant Restoration. Now we just bring all of our artifacts back to the battlefield, or enchantments, but we don't run very many of those. And Starfield of Nyx. This can be pretty useful and a lot more useful in this deck than others because we can start creating token copies of it. So now we're bringing several permanents back from our graveyard instead of just one. Let's move on to card advantage. We have those creature cards or enchantment cards that draw us a card whenever we cast an enchantment with Argothian Enchantress, Sithis Harvest's Hand, Satyr Enchanter, Mesa Enchantress, and Enchantress Presence. Last but not least, we have Verduran Enchantress. All of these are going to draw us a card whenever we cast an enchantment spell. Super simple. Very useful. Now we have the absolutely broken ones with Citizen Champion and Eidolon of Blossoms. These draw us a card whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield. So again, watch out for these two. You can deck yourself with these two, but also it's going to be extremely useful. Sylvan Library, 2 mana, comes down, gives us a ton of card advantage. We do have some life gain in the deck to mitigate that 8 damage we'll be taking, and it's going to just be amazing to smooth out our draws. Rite of Harmony. This can draw us a lot of cards, and it has that flashback ability. So super solid in the deck. Tribute to the World Tree. I like this one because if we start creating token copies of that, every time we put a 2/2 onto the battlefield, it's going to buff it to the moon. Additionally, if we do cast some 3/3s, we're going to draw some cards off of it. This is going to be an amazing card in the deck. Just think, with 3 of these on the battlefield, whenever you cast a 2/2, that just becomes a 11/11 right out of the gate. Moving on to ramp, we have Sanctum Weaver. Super solid, going to tap for a ton of mana. Awakening Zone. I like this one because it's an enchantment that creates tokens, right? That goes with the theme. So if we create a token of that, and then we get 2 tokens of that because of doubling season, we're going to get 4 tokens that we can then sack for mana. And that's just going to keep getting more absurd the more tokens we create of it. Notably, they are creatures as well, so we can use that to end the game if we have something like Tribute to the World Tree on the battlefield. We then have your enchant lands with Wild Growth, Wolf Willow Haven, and Fertile Ground. Next up, we have Smothering Tithe. Can you guys imagine creating token copies of Smothering Tithe? And then that's creating tokens, and then we're doubling it with doubling season? That sounds absurd and honestly out of control. Herald of Pantheon and Jukai Naturalist are just going to lower the cost of our enchantments straight up, which is going to be really useful because that's going to happen more than once a turn. Leyline of Immersion, I like this. It gives our commander a little bit of protection. Notably, our commander's 3 cost. This is 4 cost. So this is going to be a perfect card to shove in the deck because as soon as we hit turn 4, we're going to have access to just 9 mana. Rampant Growth, Nature's Lore, and Farseek, just solid turn 2 ramp. We also do run that Soul Ring, can't forget it. Mirari's Wake, this is going to be pretty crazy to start creating token copies of because 1, it buffs our commander and all of our creatures, and then it just doubles our mana, so that starts quadrupling our mana. You know, it gets insane really fast. Moving on to removal, we have Darksteel Mutations. Creating copies of this sounds just backbreaking. Getting this on everyone's commander is going to be miserable for them. Song of the Dryads, same thing. Kinrith's Transformation is not as bad, but it does draw us cards, so creating token copies of that is going to be super useful. Aura Shards, solid. Whenever we're creating those tokens, we're just destroying everybody else's artifacts and enchantments. Generous Gift and Beast Within, really solid removal, hits any permanent. Cavalier of Dawn, not only can this go ahead and get rid of one of those non-land permanents, but it's also going to let us get enchantment cards back from our graveyard. Wind's Wrath can be a one-sided board wipe if we have enough of those aura cards. Austere Command, super flexible, and then we have Farewell, even more flexible. That's going to do it for the deck tech, guys. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section down below. Honestly, I don't think it dethrones Sithis, but I think it's definitely more fun. As always, guys, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I'll see you in the next one.